Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining me tonight for a Family Tech Talk virtual edition. My name is Lynette Owens, and I'm the founder and global director of Trend Micro's Internet Safety for Kids and Families program. And we bring you this event in partnership with PTO Today. It's a partnership that has been in place for 11 years, and we have been delivering information and bringing communities of parents together for what we believe is one of the most important topics that we can be discussing as a parent community. And that is, how do we help our children become great digital citizens? How do we help them be safe, be responsible, and use technology in positive and healthy ways? So if you're just joining us, please say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're from, where you're dialing in from. Again, my name is Lynette Owens. I'm dialing in from Boston, Massachusetts. If you're just joining us and you want to hear tonight's session in Spanish, please select the globe icon and pick Spanish as your audio track, and you will hear my colleague Aida Mendoza interpreting tonight's session into Spanish. All right. So let's get started. Again, my name's Lynette Owens. I've been doing this work for about 13 years. I founded the program for Trend just over 13 years ago. I am a mother of 2 teenagers, and over the course of that time, really learned myself personally all of the challenges that many of you are probably facing today. How do we introduce technology into our children's lives when there's so many things that we worry about while they're there? So tonight, I hope that you will take from our conversation at least a few, if not more, tips or things to think about or ideas of how you can have important conversations with your children when it comes to their use of technology. Hello to everyone. And I also want to just remind you that you will not be seen, nor will you be heard during tonight's session. However, I do encourage you to submit your questions anytime throughout tonight through the Q&A option. We will pause during moments to be able to answer any questions that you have. I also encourage you to use the chat, because I will converse with you and ask you a few things, and feel free to connect with the other parents who are here with you tonight. Finally, at the conclusion of tonight's session, when you log off of Zoom, your web browser will bring up a very short survey, and I really would encourage you to complete that if you will, so we know what worked well for you and what we could do better. Okay, great. So I'd like to get to know you a little bit better. And before I get to that, I just want to welcome everyone who's here tonight. These are the schools who are joining us. So hello to all of you in the Mountain and Pacific time zones. If your school coordinator, whether it's your PTO president, PTA president, your principal, or some other school administrator actually organize this event for you, they might ask you for some confirmation that you attended. So we told them that every school will be assigned an attendance code. So on the right-hand side of what you're seeing here, next to your school's name, you will see an attendance code. Feel free to write that down. I will share this screen again later on in the presentation. It's easy to remember because it's basically today's date, 10/20/21, dash a number that is specific to your school. So make note of that just in case you need it. Okay, I'd like to get to know you a little bit better. So if you wouldn't mind answering using the polling option here. How old is your oldest child? Are they 5 years old or younger, 6 to 10 years old, 11 to 14 years old, or 15 or older? How old is your oldest child? A, B, C, or D? I will just leave that open for another couple of seconds. Great. Okay, so it looks like most of you are in the 6 to 10-year-old range, another group of you in the 11 to 14 range, and then a few of you have kids that are much younger or much older than that. So in any case, we're all here tonight because we probably have many common experiences and questions, but this gives me a good sense of where to focus some of the conversation and some of the topics that we'll be covering later on. I have another question for you, however. What are you most interested in discussing tonight? Is it A, managing screen time for my kids? B, helping my kids stick to age-appropriate content? C, dealing with online bullying or hate? Oh, sorry, C, yeah. D, ideas for positive uses of the internet? Or E, not sure, just here to learn something new? Which of these topics are you most interested in discussing tonight? A, B, C, D, or E? And I'll just wait for a few more minutes here. Okay, I will stop this polling right now. If you want to sneak your answer in there, go ahead. One last second. Fantastic. So it looks like we have a nice mix here. We've got, the majority of you, how do I help my kids stick to age-appropriate content? That's answer B. And then second to that is what are some ideas for positive uses of the internet? Fantastic. We're going to cover all of these issues to some extent, but I will make sure that I spend a little more time on the things that seems to be most important to you tonight. If you're just joining us, welcome. And if you'd like to listen to tonight's session in Spanish, please select the globe icon in the bottom of your screen and choose Spanish as your channel, and you can hear tonight's session in Spanish. Okay, so I think it probably goes without saying, you probably hear this sentence all the time now. Boy, has a lot changed over the last 18 months. We could all probably write one, maybe two books about it and our own personal experiences of how our lives were completely changed. And the use of technology is one of those biggest changes, not just for ourselves, but also for our children. Maybe last year, your children were forced to attend school in a remote model. Maybe your school, for the first time, issued Chromebooks to all of the students in order to do that. Maybe because you saw your children missing their friends, you allowed them to use screen time a little bit more than you would have. Or maybe you finally tried using technology in a way you yourself had not done before, like Instacart or Uber Eats or Zoom. It's funny because Zoom, prior to the pandemic, was a very well-known, very highly used communication tool for corporations. But now Zoom is something that's connecting all of us tonight and something we use very often for personal reasons. And that was a big change. But even with all of those changes, so much has not changed. One of those is that our children still very much need our guidance because this increased use of time on technology, coupled with new kinds of apps, new kinds of devices, and new kinds of issues constantly facing them, means they will never, ever not need our guidance. They will always need it. And, Likewise, the risks to them when they use technology are still there, but so are the benefits. Both of these things have always been true, and they continue to be true now. That is why teaching our children how to be good digital citizens is still a priority, and we need to make it a priority. The fact that you're here tonight means you're making it a priority. So thank you to those of you who are here, and for the things we discussed tonight, I hope you will share them with others who are not here, and maybe even encourage them to come to one of our future events. What do we mean by digital citizenship? Well, very often when we think about kids and technology, we limit our thinking to just risks. How do I help them identify those risks? And how do I help them prevent them? Yes, teaching children about safe and secure use of technology is very important. And it's absolutely an important part of digital citizenship. It's not the only thing, though. It also includes things like digital and media literacy. How do I actually use these technologies? How do I turn on privacy settings? Where are they? How do I verify something that I see online is actually trustworthy or the truth? Those are also important skills that make up being a good digital citizen. Another is how we behave. How do we behave towards others? How do we comport ourselves in online spaces where we're abiding by the rules of that online space? What are the laws that are related to our behaviors online? I think one topic here that often gets overlooked is copyright. You know, can I, as a child or even adult, can I use someone else's image and recreate something with their work? Is that a violation of copyright or not? So these are all kinds of topics that fall under ethics and community. How do we behave towards others? But there is an important fourth piece that really gets left out quite a bit. And I'm really glad tonight many of you said, I do want to talk about what are some positive uses of the internet. Because often when we talk to children about using technology, it's a long, long list of what not to do. But it's equally important when we think about digital citizenship that we also teach and role model for our children the ways in which we should use technology, the ways in which it can be beneficial for them, for others, and for the world around them. So we are going to talk about all of these things tonight. And the way that we like to organize the conversation is around 4 easy to remember buckets. The first is about being online. But in terms of how we can help our children be online, we also need to make sure we're helping them be safe, be kind, and be savvy. What do we mean by each of these? Being online is a big part of your role as their parents or guardians. It means, how do you set up the right environment, the rules, and the example that you should that will help to ensure their safety, their kindness, and their savviness. So we will talk about that in greater detail. When we get to being safe, we want to talk about protecting privacy and our personal information and even our physical selves. When we talk about being kind, most obviously it's about how you behave towards others. But as we'll discuss later, kindness is also something we need to help children direct towards themselves as well. There's a lot of pressures put on them. There's a lot of pressures when your whole life is displayed in social media, for example, to try to portray yourself in a way that may not actually be authentic to who you are. And it can create situations of a lot of anxiety because of the way people might view them or how they think people think of them. And so kindness, we feel, is not just about how we treat others, but also how we direct that kindness towards ourselves. And finally, how do we teach kids to develop good habits with technology and encourage good uses? So let's start with being online and setting up first around setting up the environment. So there's a number of things we're going to cover here. And I encourage you to use the Q&A to submit your questions, because I do believe that that some of that is going to come up as you'll see in a minute. Let's start with the easy one. This is probably something you already had to figure out over the last year and a half. How do we make sure that the physical surroundings for them help them succeed while they're using technology? If they're using, let's say, a Chromebook or even an iPad or something to support their schoolwork, not letting any other distractions be around, whether it's having them set up in a part of the house that's more quiet, or giving them headphones so they can focus at whatever is the task at hand, protecting their eyes. Children, just like adults, can have eye damage due to the blue light emitted from devices. So using things like blue light glasses, I've been told by many families they've bought a whole bunch just for the entire family because they realize they're on screens so much more. And it absolutely, without doubt, can cause damage to the back of the eyes. So if your children are online a lot, need to consider buying the blue light glasses. They are non-prescription. They're simply filtering that light, and they're not expensive. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them in packs of 4 and 6 in a bunch, and not very expensive. Another thing they could do is use the 30-30-30 rule, which means, and by the way, you could do this too as adults. Every 30 minutes, if you're working on a screen, look away about 30 feet. You could look out the window, for example, for 30 seconds. This gives your eyes the opportunity to rest. So things like posture, making sure their feet are flat on the floor if they're working on a laptop, that they're not hunched over in a bed using devices for long periods of time. This can avoid things like neck pains and back pains and headaches. So just some really basic things. Now we're going to get into some more technical things about setting up the environment. So one is around your Wi-Fi, let's say at home, your internet connection. And especially if a lot of people are using it now at home, you want to make sure of a few things. Number one, around its security. So if you have a router, when you bought that router, it came with a password. But very many people never change the password after they first bought it. So if you have not changed the password on your router in a while, I highly recommend you do that, and you do that every once in a while. The second thing you can do, especially if you're using that same network at home for work or banking or activities that have very sensitive information, versus the way your children might be using it for the Xbox or a Kindle reader or just listening to music on their iPad or something. You actually have the option to use 2 different parts of your router, your network. One is the main part, and another is a guest network. Very often you can set up 2 different ways to connect to your router. We recommend that for devices with very sensitive information, those should connect through the main part. And anything like a child's Xbox or Kindle, have that connect to the guest part of your network. That way, if their devices are ever compromised because they accidentally clicked on something and got a virus or something, it will not harm the other devices in the house connecting on that other part of the network. This is a very good practice that we know a lot of families are not doing right now, and we highly recommend you consider doing that. Certainly, if they have friends come over and they want to borrow your Wi-Fi, have them connect on the guest network, not on the same one that you are using to do things like banking or, confidential emails for work. If you need to buy a Wi-Fi extender, that just makes sure that the connectivity everywhere in your home is good. Otherwise, you notice you have to be very close to the router to have a good connection. If you buy an extender and you plug it into a different part of your house, it will make the Wi-Fi signal strong in that other part of the house. And finally, if everyone has to be on it at the same time, have conversations at the beginning of the day. Tell each other, hey, I've got this important presentation, which is what I did tonight. Told my kids, I need to be on it at this hour. Please don't, be on the Xbox, or don't be doing heavy streaming while I'm trying to be on it, just to make sure my connection is smooth. Okay. On security, this is specifically around the devices that you use, the devices your children use. You make sure there is security software on every device that connects to the internet. This is extremely important because cyber criminals today have been even more active than prior to the pandemic. Why? Because they know we're all online all the time. So security software will make sure that if your child clicks on a website by accident that actually has malicious software on it, security software will block you from even going to the website in the first place. If you get an email with an attachment that's actually got a harmful piece of code on it, you will be blocked from opening such an attachment, or you will be warned before you do. Make sure that security software is on all of your devices. And when you install it, turn on the firewall. That's a feature within security software, because that firewall is watching traffic as it goes in and out of your device. And it's basically like a bouncer telling you, this one's okay to come in, but that one is not. So never turn that off. Make sure that is on. And I think the strong passwords message is pretty obvious, but I'll show you an exercise you can use with your kids. Even at young ages, they can start practicing really good password skills. And hopefully it's a skill they'll take with them long into adulthood. Using multi-factor authentication. Sometimes it's called two-factor authentication. Sometimes it's called two-step verification. It's all the same thing. It exists in Facebook. It exists in Instagram, in Roblox, in TikTok, in almost every device, app, or game that your kids love to use, and you too. What is it? It's basically like a second lock. The password is the first. Multi-factor authentication is the second. And how does it work? Well, let's take Facebook as an example. In order for you to use Facebook, you log in with a password. If you have multi-factor authentication turned on, then you will now receive a code once you log in with the password, and that code would be sent to your email address or to a phone that you told Facebook to send it to. And you need that special code to unlock the second lock, and now you're in your account. The reason this is important is now more than ever before, we know that people's passwords are getting leaked on the dark web. And in fact, we have a wonderful free tool that you could use right now to check if your password or email address has been leaked on the dark web for various websites that you use. I can tell you about it later on in today's talk. But if someone were to steal your password, they cannot get into your Facebook, because they would then need access to your email address or actually have your phone to receive that second code, that second key to unlock. That's why multi-factor authentication is very important. If you have not turned this on every app your kids are using, please do it tomorrow or tonight, and do it for yourself as well. And finally, using a virtual private network is an extra layer of protection, especially if your children are using Wi-Fi outside of your own home. Okay, somewhere in public, like a public library, a Starbucks, an airport, wherever it is. You should never connect to a public Wi-Fi without using a virtual private network, because while your device might be secure and the website that you're talking to or connecting to, it might be secure, information you're sending to it's got to travel. And that route of travel might not be protected. If you use a virtual private network, you're now protecting that information as it travels. So highly recommend. Now, where do you find these things? You can do a search on cnet.com, cnet.com, and look up the top 10 software security offerings or virtual private networks. I work for Trend, which is a cybersecurity company. We're often in that top 10, but you might already have some that are on your laptops. Make sure you're keeping that software up to date, and if you haven't renewed it, you should renew that so it's always active and protecting you. And if you have questions, I do recommend you put it into the Q&A so that we'll be able to address those. Now, some good habits in terms of setting up the environment in your house. Update everything. Lots of apps, especially over the last year, have been getting lots of updates. Your kids' apps, your games, they get update notifications. So I recommend do them as often as they come. On a phone, if you set it to update automatically, the problem with that is it can drain your battery very quickly. So I like to recommend that you, at night, when you plug in the phone before bedtime, hit update all and let it do all the updating while your phone is charging. That way you don't slow down your phone while you're using it and you don't drain your battery. It's really important because a lot of these updates lately have been to cover up security holes that were not known to the people who developed the apps. So make sure you're always updating. The other thing we talked about earlier was strong passwords. So one skill that you could teach your kid is come up with a good password. You don't have to think of a string of characters you'll never remember. Why don't you come up with a sentence that's really fun? Something they could come up with on their own. And they should use the first letter of each word in the sentence as their password. Throw in an extra character, a special character like an exclamation point or an asterisk or a question mark, and maybe make some of the letters uppercase and some lowercase. But that's a good way that you can practice good password skills. Another is you could use a password manager. Google has a password manager. We at Trend Micro, we have a free password manager. These are free tools that help you not only generate good, strong passwords, but keep them safe, encrypted, and only you can open it up and remember what password was for what site. And finally, back everything up. If you can use something like Apple Cloud or Google Cloud, that's great. They give you some space for free, but then you have to pay to get more space. That's great. Do the backup in the cloud. But if you can also get one of those hard drive ones as a secondary backup, that's a good idea too. Why do I say this? If your information that's up in the cloud ever gets hacked for some reason and it gets taken, you at least have the hard drive version. Or if your hard drive version gets dropped or broken or lost, then you will have the other backup in the cloud. So if you can, I highly recommend having both options as your backup. On tech tools, many of you tonight said, I'm concerned about making sure my kids only look at content that's age appropriate for them. So what are these tech tools? These tech tools can help you filter content by age. They can limit the kinds of purchasing they could do within an app. You can even set time limits, some of these tools, and also you can monitor what they're doing. And not all of these tools will cost you money. Quite a few of them are already free and they exist inside the apps and the devices you already own. Things like your router or your kid's iPad or your Android phone or the actual sites or apps themselves. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples in a second here. In the chat, how many of your kids are using Apple devices? You can just put it in the chat. Anyone's kids using Apple devices, iPads, iPhones? Remember the iPod Touch? I wonder if those are still out there. iPod Touch, yes. So there's a feature in there, and I don't know if all of you are familiar with it. It's called iOS Screen Time. Anybody out there using iOS Screen Time? Good, good. For those of you who are, fantastic. I'm just going to quickly show it for those of you who haven't seen it before. You can go into the settings of your Apple device, select a setting called Screen Time that you see in front of here. And what you need to do is set up each of your kids under your Apple account. And here I'm pointing to my two kids. Their names are blurred out because they would not like it if I was showing you their names. You select one of those children, and now inside their account, you can do a number of things. Not only can you see how long they were using their device, you can even see how many times they picked it up. That's how detailed Apple gets with what they're tracking. But you can take a look at how much time were they spending on gaming apps versus social media apps versus texting. And you can do things like set restrictions on the kinds of apps they're allowed to download from the iTunes store. You can set limits on the amount of time that they spend on a specific app, and so on. So I highly recommend, if you're not using screen time in your children's children's Apple devices, that you look at that. It doesn't cost you anything. It's part of the actual device. How many families out there are using Android devices? Just let me know in the chat. Any Android using families? I see some hands raised as well. So of course, Google's got their version of the same thing. It's an app called Google Family Link. Google Family Link enables you to do very similar things, like limit the kinds of apps that they're allowed to download. You could say, I don't want them downloading any app that's for over age 12, or I don't want them downloading any social media apps, and so on. But it also helps you manage things like, how much screen time they're spending on that device. And if they've got a mobile Android device, it can also do things like track their location, right? Because if geolocation is put on. So there's a question in here. Do you recommend creating a separate Apple ID for kids? Yeah, you can do that. You could do a quick search on Apple. They have a great support page that tells you how exactly to do that. Even when they're under the age of 13, you can do that. And what you can do, that enables you to use the screen time capabilities to control what they're able to do on their devices, if that makes sense. So I hope that helps. Now, I've got a quiz question here. Who knows what is the popular app that children love to use that is owned by Google? I'll give you a hint. They watch videos on it. We got one answer. Put it in the chat if you know the answer. Yes, YouTube, correct. Google bought YouTube many years ago for a lot of money from the couple who founded it. And it was a great purchase because I know it's made them a lot of money. But the thing about YouTube is, as much as we all love it, it also gives us a lot of anxiety, because if you let a child on there, who knows what they're going to see. They might search for one video, and then right after that, a really inappropriate video shows up right after, right? And back in 2014, Google introduced an app called YouTube for Kids. This is a great option if your child is really, really young and loves Elmo. It is not a great option for the kids who are over the age of 9 and tell you that's for babies. I'm old enough to see more, but you worry about all the adult content, let's say, that they might see. So Google this year introduced for YouTube a new capability called the YouTube supervised account. What is this? This is available to not just people who have Android phones. This is available to any parents, but you do have to have a Google account. And what this enables you to do is to set up your child's access to YouTube based on their age ranges. Okay, they call it Explore, Explore More, or most of YouTube. And the way they think about this is if you choose Explore, that's going to give them access to content for probably appropriate up to age 11, 12 years old. If you choose Explore More, now they're going to get access to content that's okay for up to age 14. And if you choose most of YouTube, that will be content that's really okay all the way up through age 17. What this does is it's not allowing them still to see any content that's for 18 plus, which is more adult content, right? So I give credit to them. It took them forever to get to this point, but in better late than never. This is a way, if you're worried about your children and what they might be exposed to when they're watching YouTube, I highly recommend you look into setting up a YouTube supervised account for your children, especially those of you who said, between the ages of 6 and 10 or 11 and 14, and you're worried about some of the content they might be exposed to. I highly recommend that you do this. I have a few more apps here that are extremely popular. I'm not going to spend too much time on each of them, but I will just highlight some things about them. The first is, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's an app called TikTok. Anyone never heard of it? I am being a little facetious, but very many parents worry about TikTok, and some others actually are fine with it. That's okay. Wherever you land on that spectrum is fine. But for those of you who aren't quite ready to allow your child to have their own TikTok account, and technically for most social networks, you're supposed to be 13 and above, but I know there's plenty of kids using social networks under the age of 13 and their parents are fine with it. TikTok introduced in early last year something called TikTok family pairing. It's a wonderful way for you, if you're not ready for your child to have full access to TikTok, or you think your child is not ready to be posting lots of stuff on TikTok yet. This is a nice way to ease you both in to the experience. How does it work? First of all, you would need to download TikTok on both your device as the parent and their device as the kid using it. And once you are in there, once you set it up, you go under their settings and look for something called digital well-being. When you get to digital well-being, you'll select family pairing and you will designate your phone as parent here on the bottom. Once you're in there, you're now able to decide how much time the child that has been paired with your account can spend on it, what kind of content they're allowed to see on it, and who, if anyone, is allowed to even contact them on it. I highly recommend trying this out if you're not quite ready to let your child fully use TikTok without any supervision. And I've tried it, and I will say that it's pretty good. You mostly see content of pretty harmless and fun stuff, animals falling asleep and falling off chairs, or really cute things, senior citizens doing fun TikTok dances, really harmless stuff. So give it a try if you want to figure out how you might ease your way into TikTok. Anybody ever hear of Roblox? Just let me know in the chat. This is probably one of the fastest growing apps out there, especially during the pandemic. All of these apps, by the way, experienced phenomenal growth over the last year and a half. And Roblox, for those of you who are not familiar, is not a game. Roblox is a community of people who game. And kids can create games or they can play other people's games. It's a fantastic, fantastic place. And I do give Roblox a lot of credit for how they are managing their communities. If you're not aware already, though, they have quite a number of privacy and security settings that you can easily set up. I mentioned earlier two-factor authentication. Set it up in Roblox if you haven't. And this quick video just shows you how you would do this. You, as a parent, go into settings, pick security, and you have to first set up a PIN. And once you set up that PIN, no one can change these settings unless they have the PIN. Okay, it's a lot like Apple devices too. So you can go and set privacy settings, decide who's allowed to chat with your kid, if anyone. And anytime, again, you change it, you've got to re-enter the PIN. So that's totally up to you. So if you've not spent time with Roblox settings, please do. Another thing you should know about Roblox, the thing about Roblox is it is a community. So even if your child is playing a very harmless game, I play the one where you have a bee following you around and you dig flowers and it collects pollen and you make more honey and so on. It's pretty benign. But I can chat with other people who are in that game. I don't know who they are. I just see their usernames floating over the heads of their avatars. The chat allows for free-form conversation. So what Roblox has done is they have a very strong system, both automated where they're able to detect language, but also human moderators, so that if someone on a game asks your child, hey, where do you live? Or what is your phone number? Those words will never see the screen. They completely block that kind of stuff. They don't want those kinds of conversations happening between players. So, become familiar with these settings if you're not already. And if you haven't played it yourself, you should play it with your kid. It's pretty fun, pretty harmless kind of stuff. Okay. Anyone here of Discord? Anybody's kids using Discord? Yeah, I see some hands raised. Discord's actually been around for a while, a little less known than TikTok and Roblox, Instagram, Snapchat. Discord's basically like an Uber messaging app, okay? And a lot of gamers used it for a long time, but it's become very popular with even kids at 9, 10 years old. So if they want to create a group chat, they might use Discord to do that. And they gather in places called servers. It's really just a community. So think about your own phone. When you create a group chat in your phone through just messaging, you might have one group that's for my neighborhood and another group text that's just for my family members and another group text that's just for, close friends or something. So Discord allows people to do the same thing. The difference here, though, is while you can set up your own private groups, you can also join massive communities as well. There's big communities around things like Harry Potter fans or Minecraft builders or even all kinds of stuff, sports and movies and you name it. So you can create your own groups or you can join other big groups. Does that mean, though, that they can encounter lots of people they don't know? Yes. And that's why you as parents, if your child asks you about Discord, to be on it, make sure you're setting up the settings so that, either you allow them only to message with close friends or you're going to allow them to just see everything. It's kind of like social media is the same way. You could just be connecting only with a small group, or you could be seeing what lots of other people are posting too. So very similar. So I'm not going to go through it in great detail, but you can do a lot of things to keep your kids safe, like limit who they can connect with or who can chat with them, and even block users that they think are they don't want to engage with them. They don't want to hear from them anymore. Okay. And, one of the things, I just got to put a tiny plug in here because we've been doing this work for 13 plus years. And one of the things I've noticed is that over the last decade, the settings have gotten better. They're not perfect. All these apps and all these devices, there's a lot of pressure on them. They didn't do a lot of these things in the early days, certainly not back when I started doing all this research and work, but it's gotten better over the last 5 years. However, for you as a parent, you still need to go to every single one of these apps and do all of these settings. And if your kids use 8, 9, 10 different apps, it's a lot of stuff. So what we decided to do at no charge to the public, because we feel this is really important for parents and families to get their kids online in ways that are safe, we developed a tool called Trend Micro Family, free to you. Give it a try. It's at tmfamily.care. And we can help you do a lot of this through just one app without having to go to multiple apps. We can also help you do things like limit how much time your kids are on all these different apps. You could set it differently for each child. One of the features I like on this one is if they ever come up on a web page and some of the content is okay, but there might be this ad or this image that's really not appropriate, it will only blur that image that's not appropriate. The rest of it, if it's fine, won't be blurred out. So I'd love for you all to give it a try and give us your feedback. And we want to build it based on what you need. This is nothing that we're charging for, because we just noticed that there wasn't anything out there to make this easier for you. So, all right. I see a question here. My son is asking to play Roblox and I'm not ready for him to play it. What's an appropriate age for it? You know, I think this is a good question, but it's really going to be based on, you know, a combination of your readiness, your child's readiness, and really what he wants to use it for. So before you decide, I highly recommend you either go to Roblox site and do a little bit of homework. They do a great job with their content, explaining what is Roblox and what a child can do on it. I actually recommend at 6, they don't need to be chatting with anyone, and they don't need to be creating their own games yet. Let them just play the Bumblebee game, the one that I just explained to you. And maybe they have a sibling they could play it with, or a cousin they could play it with, and that's it. But start small. There's no reason to jump into it right away. The biggest pressure that we get as parents is other people's parenting. It's when your kid comes home and says, but so-and-so has a phone, but so-and-so is allowed to use it. How come I can't? Right? And that's where the hardest part of parenting comes when it comes to technology. So I encourage you move at your own pace. Don't feel the pressure to have to move at anyone else's pace but yours. Okay, great. Let's talk about setting the rules. And it's really quickly here, 5 things to consider. The first is, what are they allowed to use? If you're not sure, like Roblox or any new app, if your child comes home and says, Mom, Dad, can I please download such and such game? Do your homework. Do a search. If it looks like an app on the App Store that doesn't have a whole lot of reviews yet, I would wait for a little while. If you can find reviews about it and they are, you know, glowing and there's lots of reviews, then maybe it's fine. I'm a big fan of Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media is an organization that reviews websites, apps, games. They give you a great sense of what is it and what's really the appropriate age for it, no matter what the app company says. The app company might say 9 years old, but it's really great to read a third party's objective reviews. So you decide what they can use, and then when can they use it. Your rules about, hey, no video games during the week, only on the weekends, or only after your homework is done. How long can they use it? And we'll talk about a great way to think about screen time in a minute. Where are they allowed to use it? You know, I don't recommend phones in the bedrooms before bedtime. All of the research shows that looking at screens within an hour of going to bed really doesn't help them go to bed. So charging the phones outside the room at night, they don't need them at night. And they really shouldn't be looking at screens within an hour of their bedtime, if at all possible. And finally, with whom are they allowed to use it? Is it just people you know in person? Is it family that might be far away? Or is it even a bigger group than that? So as you think about your rules, think about it in these 5 contexts, and also consider when you're setting rules, having the conversation about the rules with your kids, even helping them, encouraging them to build those rules with you, including what the consequences are going to be. So to my child, I say, all right, I told you you can only use it for an hour. And if you go over that time, here is what's going to happen. Or what do you think should happen if you go over that time? Get them involved in this discussion because they're more apt to stick to the rules they helped create. And if there are siblings in the family, they will also help enforce it with each other. It's a wonderful thing to see when you get them holding each other accountable without you having to get involved. So a lot of you, some of you in the upfront survey, poll said you were worried about how do I manage screen time? So this is a concept that comes from the Digital Wellness Lab out of Children's Hospital Boston, Harvard Medical. So a lot of pediatricians use this technique when they are dealing with families that are struggling with managing screen time in their homes. And so rather than taking really, sort of abrupt approaches at an early age, have your children start to think about the 24 hours, right? The fact that there are 24 hours in a day only, and there are things in that 24 hours they need to do that's really good and healthy and important for them. All right. So a great idea, a great way you could do this with your kids is to consider each day and either have them draw a circle and start coloring slices of a pie in it, or just have them write it down, or you write it down for them and just have a discussion. But you first ask them about all the time they spend in a day to support their physical health. So things like, how many hours did you sleep? How much time did you spend having or helping to prepare meals? The time you spent exercising or running around outside, riding your bike, going for a walk, walking the dog. Okay, so that will be a certain amount of time in a day. The next thing after that is how many hours in the day did they spend to support them as learners? So how many hours did they spend at school, doing homework, practicing a skill like an instrument, or maybe it's a sport or a dance hobby that they like, reading, anything that they're doing to support them as learners, how many hours? Now, on top of that, how many hours are they spending in a day to support the relationships that are important in their lives, with family, with friends, with neighbors, with other people that are very important to their social and emotional well-being? How many hours? All right. So now you add them all up. That's quite a bit of time, probably in a given 24-hour period. So there's time left over. And in that time left over, it would be perfectly fine to use screen time for fun. Okay. But just because there's time left over, and that time left over might be 5-6 hours, for example, it doesn't mean you should spend 5 or 6 hours on screens. That's where you as a parent can use the tools that we talked about before and the rules that you have set to put some definition around the screen time they are spending. Now, some ideas that I've talked to parents about is, well, what could they do with that free time? Well, I think a great idea is to have kids write different activities on pieces of paper, fold them up, put them in a box, and they can pick from there, what am I going to do with that free time now? Maybe it includes Xbox. Maybe it includes non-screen time, like playing a board game or drawing or helping or doing something else. But it's totally fine if some of that free time is spent with screens, as long as all of these other things in their day, they are spending a healthy amount of time towards. But having this kind of conversation with your kid helps them really think, oh, there are other things I need to be doing in a day that's really good for me. Make sure they are doing all of those things before they're spending time. And it's fine to spend that time for fun. In closing out this being online section, and this is the biggest part of our talk tonight, setting a good example, I think it kind of goes without saying what this means, but you as parents should ask yourselves, what rules do you have for yourself when it comes to technology? If you work at home, how do you know that home work is done and home time begins? Do you have rules about that? And how are you setting an example for your children? What kinds of behaviors are you doing that are the kinds you want your children to be ways that you want your children to be behaving as well? When I used to do these sessions with parents face to face, I would often ask them to go home and ask your child to draw a picture of you when it comes to your use of technology. And I remember this one mother said, when I heard from her later on, that her child drew a picture of her with just the eyes, just the top half of her face, and a box, like a rectangle in front of the lower half of her face, because that was the way she saw her mother, always in front of the laptop. And so good behaviors might be that maybe you're not always using the laptop right in front of your kids. Maybe that's in a different part of the house, but when you're with them, you're present with them, that you're not always looking at your phone while you should be having a conversation with them. I know for my kids, it's always about putting the phone face down when we're trying to have a conversation, and not dual looking at anything, being totally present in the moment. Certainly not looking at your phone while you're trying to either have dinner, certainly not doing it while you're driving. These are the kind of behaviors, these are examples of behaviors you want your children to model, because they will follow whatever they're seeing you do. Okay. On being safe, I think this is a really fun part of the conversation, one that kids really like to talk about when I go into classrooms. So let's start with privacy. It's just really important that they use privacy settings, but to be honest with you, a lot of kids, once they start using social media, they're pretty good about putting their privacy settings on. Not all, but a majority of them are. Excuse me. But here's the thing about privacy settings that I think is really important for them to understand. And I'm showing you a screenshot here, screenshots of Fortnite. Anybody's kids use Fortnite? My son has aged out of it, but he was quite a very heavy user of it at one time. Very often the default settings when you download a new game, app, or device are not the kind of privacy settings you want. So, if your child ever asks to use a new app or game, make it a contest. See how quickly they can find the privacy settings and tell you, how to turn them on. How would you turn it on? What kinds of options are available for privacy? Do it together if your child is too young to really grasp the concept. And the reason is you want to get them into a habit where in the future, when they're downloading new apps, they go right to the privacy settings and set it in the way that will protect them the most. But here's the thing about privacy settings. While they protect us from those that we don't know, They prevent those we don't know from seeing all the things we're doing or posting or conversations we might be having with those we do want to connect with. There is something interesting about privacy settings. So, when we download a new app, you see all that legal language that we don't read because it's thousands of words long. You scroll right past it and we go to the bottom and we hit I agree or I accept. Does anyone do that? Or does everyone read every word in those legal languages? So we don't read it. But there is a clause in almost every one of these apps that we love to use that is written in a different way, but very simply says, you own everything you do on here, but you give us the right to use it whenever, wherever, forever. When you hit I accept or I agree, one of the things that you're accepting or agreeing to is that clause. Okay. Why would they want to use that information? Well, this is the conversation about why are apps free? And I encourage you to have that conversation with your kids, right? The reason that they want that information is they want to start developing a profile of cohorts of people like you, that they notice that many of their users who are like you, they live in this place, they're this age, they like these kinds of things, they start to develop a profile of people. And that information, as someone put in the chat, is information they sell to advertisers. They don't care about you per se. They care about the people that you are like. And they sell that information about your behaviors to the advertisers so they can stay in business. The reason they don't charge us is because they do make money. They need to make money. They won't survive without it. But that is why. So that's the thing about privacy settings, that while they protect us from the people we don't want, strangers we don't want seeing our stuff, they have no protection between us and the company who made that app. That's the reason why when we tell children nothing you ever do online is truly private, that's the reason. Yes, we don't want you to do anything that will endanger you. We don't want you to post things that might embarrass yourself down the road. All of that is true. That's why you should use privacy settings. But in reality, you have no privacy, period. And this is why. This is what it means to be free. When apps say they're free, it's because we give up our privacy. So telling our children, that's when we're saying, I assume nothing is private online, we're not just trying to scare them. The real reason is the business behind free. On our personal information, as I said earlier, cyber criminals have been extremely active of late because so many of us are online all the time. And they're not necessarily going after your kids. Your kids don't have bank accounts, although they do have social security numbers, which can be very valuable to cyber criminals. One thing I would caution many of you to think about is this. When a baby is born, they are assigned a social security number. And if you post on social media, so-and-so just had a baby today who lives in this state, you have now already signaled several numbers, several clues to a cyber criminal of the social security number of that child. So what I might recommend to all of you I know Facebook loves to encourage us, hey, so-and-so's birthday is today, you should tell him happy birthday. Either consider not giving Facebook your information about your birthday or anyone else's birthday, and sending them a private Facebook Messenger message instead of blasting it to the public. But unfortunately, we've kind of been conditioned by Facebook to give up a lot of that information in a very public way. It's a treasure trove for these cyber criminals. We just made it way too easy for them to find out a lot about us. What I recommend to your kids in terms of cybercrime is they're not going to be victim to this stuff the way we would, but they go to the places that the cyber criminals go to the places that your kids are online. They show up in fake search engine results, ads that look too good to be true. Just enter your email address and you might win an Xbox or an iPad, right? And sometimes it's fake social media posts, whatever. There's all these kinds of tricks that cyber criminals use to get kids or you to click. And you think you're going to that page, but in fact, behind the scenes, you're downloading malicious software. You have no idea it's happening, right? So that's why I said earlier, make sure you're using security software on every device that they're connecting to. And encourage your children to trust their instincts. I do know that, having been in many classrooms and saying, have you ever gotten a suspicious text? And so many hands go up, or a pop-up ad that looks too good to be true. So many hands go up. So your kids are really onto it. They know when something is suspicious. So encourage that instinct that if it looks too good to be true, do not click on it. Do not give it any personal information. And finally, if they feel like they made a mistake, maybe they tapped on something with their little fingers that they didn't mean to, or clicked on a link that they didn't mean to, and they feel like something went wrong, make sure the door is open for them to come to you and say, I think I clicked on something by accident. I'm not sure if that was a bad thing or not. You would rather know that they did that than them not tell you, because if they accidentally downloaded something like spyware on a PC or laptop that you use for banking or shopping or doing your taxes, you want to know if that's the case. And there are many great free tools out there that you can scan your computer with right away to say, did I get any kind of infection at all? Trend Micro has a free tool. It's been around forever. Huge fans of it, called House Call. Look up House Call. It can do a scan of your system right away to tell you if there's anything on there. But if you're using security software, you should be fine. Your child will not be able to click on a link that is in fact malicious. Now, I want to ask another question for those of you still there. Let's launch the poll. So this question is, do any of your kids have their own cell phones? A, yes. B, no. C, not yet, but soon. Or D, not for a few more years. Do any of your kids have their own cell phone? Yes, no, not yet, but soon, or not for a few more years. Okay. I'll just leave that for a couple more seconds and then I'm gonna close it out. Okay, so it looks like the majority of you said no. I do not. My kids do not yet have a cell phone, or not yet, but soon. All right, so eventually all of you will be saying yes, because eventually you will be, your kids will be in a stage where they'll get a cell phone. But for those of you who are not quite there yet, I think it's good to have this conversation now among us parents for the moment that you say yes to the phone. And I don't actually want to talk about the phone so much. I want to talk about something about that phone that every kid loves, and that is the camera. Because the camera allows us to take selfies, take pictures of our dogs or our friends, or create movies, film things, post them on TikTok, and so on, right? And it's great. Children should do that. We should encourage those fine, good uses of the camera. But I do want to encourage you to make sure at the moment you give your kid their first phone, please have the conversation about the kinds of pictures they might take with it that they wouldn't want the whole world to see. And because I don't know exactly who is on the line tonight, I won't use any words that might feel uncomfortable for if there's any children listening. I will say this, though, if there are any children listening, you should never, ever, ever feel pressured by anyone, even if they're a close friend, to take a picture of yourself that you would not want shared with everyone. Okay. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, based on information from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and another nonprofit that we work closely with called Thorn, there is a rise in self-produced material of underage kids that really shouldn't be out there. And I think as parents, we really need to be on top of this. We need to have these difficult conversations early on. They should not feel pressured to ever put those out there. And even if they just take the picture and never send it to anyone, just the fact that they took it already puts them at risk, because if you're backing up all of your devices in the cloud, then some of those images are going to move out there. And they're already, now there's a duplicate copy of it in the cloud and on their device. So never feel pressured to do it. And make sure you have that conversation with your kids. Technically, the production, possession, and distribution of that kind of material of underage children is a felony. But as my work with law enforcement officers around the country has proven, they're not going to go after two 13-year-old kids who have a crush on each other and were exchanging such images, right? Not the way that they would if it was a 50-year-old person trying to get those images from a child. If it ever does happen, I had a great question from a father many years ago who said to me, what if my child didn't do anything and they receive one of those images? I'm really worried about that because the phone is in my name as his father, and he's a good kid that a lot of people like. But what if somebody sends one to him because they like him, quote unquote? What should I do? And this is my advice to you, and that you should pass on to your children as well. First of all, if they get one of those images, they should tell you immediately and then delete it. They should not be walking around with it, especially if it's an underage peer or other person, their age, underage. And the reason is this: taking action, the action they took is telling you, right? And if you feel comfortable, by the way, if it's an image of somebody, let's say a classmate that the parents, you might want to approach those parents and say, hey, you should know this happened. If you don't feel comfortable about it, you might want to report it to school administrators. And this is why, because it could be being sent to other people. You have no idea whether your child is the only one who received it, but certainly there will be an investigation if that is the case. And in that investigation, they're going to already know it went to your child. Okay, they're going to know because they can easily tell that it went from this IP address to that IP address. But you do not want to be walking around in possession of it. So make sure your child feels they can come to you with the information and delete it. Do not forward it on. Do not carry it around at all. And again, I've had many other law enforcement officers say that is good advice, because by distributing it, you're also, the child who did it might actually be regretting it, and it's just causing more harm for that child. So that is my advice. Hopefully this will never ever happen to you, but I think it's an important conversation to have with your kids before you give them their first phone. On gaming, I will just say this about two things about gaming. Number one, there was a time when games were just you and the console. I played Space Invaders with an Atari machine. I could not play Space Invaders against somebody on the other side of the world. Today, every game is social. You can, in fact, be playing against people you don't know in another part of the world. So if your child is not ready for that, if you don't want them gaming with just whomever, back to what we talked about, use the privacy settings, understand what is available to you. Microsoft launched what's called Xbox Family. It's a free app that enables you to do those settings from your phone. You can even set time limits. You don't have to go to the console where they're in another room playing it, you could actually set the time limits right on your phone using their app. Okay. The second thing, does anyone have children who struggle to stop playing the game even after you told them, hey, time's up? Anyone have kids like that? They get really upset because they're in the middle of it. Yep. I see some hands raised. Yeah. Couple of things to consider. Think about games that actually have an end time. Minecraft is great game for many, many reasons, but it has no end time. You can use some of the timer things that we talked about to limit that time for your children. But another option is to use games that have the end time. I like Rocket League. Rocket League. Anyone ever hear of it? The kids just drive these cars around and they just hit this big soccer ball into a net. You're just playing soccer with cars, basically. And the cars can do flips and other cool tricks. But eventually the time just ticks down and the game is over and there's a natural end to it. So if you have children who kind of struggle with separating from games that have no end, I might recommend redirecting them to games that have those timers. NBA 2K21, Madden, those are for a little bit older kids because some of those games are really complicated. But I like Rocket League because it's very simple. And there are others out there, but just consider games with timers, end times. Okay, great. On being kind, I think I'll just say this, and as we go through the rest of these last two sections go quite quickly, so I'll be wrapping it up fairly soon. But I will say this, that at young ages, our kids, they're already hearing the message in school, how to be a good classmate. We should be nice to each other, right? Because it's the right thing to do. But we have to remind them that, again, for reasons we talked about before, that nothing we do online is truly private. So whatever they're actually doing online or saying online is like a permanent marker on a wall. It's being recorded and it can be seen by others. And so people will come to a conclusion of the kind of person you are based on how you're behaving online. And kindness is not just about don't say mean things, right? It's also about showing respect. Privacy is one of them. Have you ever had someone post a picture of you or your kids on Facebook that didn't ask your permission and you weren't happy about? Has that ever happened to you? It can cause a lot of strife among families, I've seen it happen with tweens. The first time they all get access to Instagram, they start taking photos with each other, posting it online. They go crazy in those first few months, right? But, it also can become a source of drama because all of a sudden one kid who posts it and didn't tell everybody else in it says, well, of course they posted it. They look really good in it, but I don't, and the rest of us don't. And then they start whispering behind that kid's back. And before you know it, these huge drama things blow up in the schools. It happens a lot. So one thing you could teach your kids when they start using social media and posting photos with their friends for the first time, have all those friends agree with each other. Hey, are you okay if I post this? Are you good with that? Just make it a normal part of their conversations with each other. Something you can also do with your friends and family. Are you okay if I post this or not? Everybody has different lines when it comes to privacy. Everybody also has different lines when it comes to rules and values. So some kids are not going to get the phone till later. Okay. And if your child is one of the ones that gets it early, but their friends don't, make sure that they're not creating group texts and excluding the kids that don't have the phone yet. I constantly see this as well. Remind your children, hey, so-and-so doesn't have a phone yet, so can you make sure you call them and let them know you're all going to go to the movies together or you're all going to be doing whatever. Different families will have different values, and let's teach our children to respect that fact. And finally, I think it's important for our kids to be buoyed by us as their parents when they start to use social media, because as I said earlier, it can be very reaffirming. You ever post something on Facebook and a whole bunch of people comment and give it hearts and give it likes? Doesn't that feel good? Feels really good when that happens. And then have you ever posted something where nobody commented or responded, right? And you wonder, why didn't they? Well, when that happens to kids, it feels even more intense. They post something they don't get a lot of likes for, and they see a peer who gets tons of likes all the time. Or they send a friend request and the person doesn't accept it. All of these crazy nuances that happen in the context of social media can start to make a child feel like their value is equal to the number of likes, followers, and so on that they're getting on social media. It's up to us as their parents to remind them, you are not equal to the value of likes and comments and followers. You are greater than that. We've got to watch closely if our children start to get too caught up in these kinds of things, that they do not equate their value to just what is happening on social media. That is our job. And so you can help nurture kindness for your kids online by not only being supportive, asking questions, checking in with them, making sure you know things are okay, being prepared, and I'd like to encourage you to think about 2 questions. Hopefully you will never, ever have to think about these again, but be prepared. And those 2 questions are, what would you do if your child was ever bullied online? And the second question is, what would you do if your child was the one being unkind online? Again, hopefully you'll never have to refer to that at all. But as parents, we should think about what we might do rather than be caught off guard and very reactive in the moment. Have conversations with other parents too. What would you do if either of those situations took place? And I know I have an agreement with some friends saying, hey, if you ever see my kid doing anything like that, will you please tell me so that I can deal with it, and I'll do the same for you. Okay. Finally, there are those moments where we're online and we see something really awesome happen. Someone being really kind, someone doing something really positive for others or the world. When you find those stories, please share them with your children so that they know that not everything that's going on is awful and negative and hateful and divisive, that there's still very good things and good people out there. So please share those stories with them so that they know the world is not as bleak as it may seem. I'll close with good habits and good uses, and I love to close with this one because hopefully you'll take away some things you can do immediately after today's session. The thing about the internet is that we don't always easily distinguish between that which we can trust and that which we cannot, because it's far too easy, for example, to create an account and pretend to be somebody that we are not. You can just grab an image from somewhere, make that your avatar, make up a fake name, and all of a sudden you have an account and you're a different being, right? On Instagram or Twitter or wherever. If you're ever curious about whether or not, I wonder if that's really that person, if that picture they're using is really them. So kids are pretty savvy about this. And if you're not already aware, you can do what's called a reverse Google image search. So look up reverse image search on Google and take a copy of that photo and put it in there. And Google will tell you whether that photo has appeared in any other places. So someone who's using an image that's supposedly them, and then you find out that's a picture that's been in a website over here and a magazine over there, and then you can really question whether or not you can trust if that was real or not. When it comes to things like news or information or hoaxes or whatever, I think the key here is pause. Don't believe everything immediately. Pause before you believe it, share it, like it, comment on it, get angry about it, whatever it is. Pause and ask questions and teach your children to do the same. And I recommend, as a guide for this, we worked with the National Association for Media Literacy Education on a parent's guide to media literacy. This handout will be in a list of links that I'll be sending out to all of the attendees tonight, which refers to many things that we covered throughout this evening. And this is one of those links. And it's a great guide because it goes through scenarios of where your child might say, hey, I saw this ad, and this ad said that if I buy this, I can become, really strong or jump higher and dunk a basketball or whatever, and helps them through scenarios of fake news or, hoaxes and things like that. So highly recommend that. Another good habit, I will ask you all, has anyone ever looked up your own name on the internet? Has anyone ever looked up your own name on the internet? And what did you find? Yep. So I did. I found someone who owns a business in San Diego, looks pretty successful. I also found someone, a Lynette Owens, who's in jail. You could write to her in jail. Neither of these people are me. These are my cyber twins. You may have them too. I also find pictures of myself, but I've also found people who share my name. So it's a good idea to do this once in a while, especially for our children as well, because there might be stuff out there that you don't realize is out there about that. And maybe not all of it is bad, that's fine. But maybe some of it you don't want to be out there. It's a good idea to check. And you don't need to go looking proactively. You can actually set something up called an alert, Google Alert. You go to google.com/alerts and you enter in a name or any phrase that you want Google to alert you on. And they will alert you only on content that is publicly indexable, okay? That means anything you posted behind privacy settings on Facebook or Instagram, that will not appear. That is not publicly indexable, okay? Only the stuff that is available to the public would show up. So instead of having to go to Google every time, I recommend set up an alert on your own name or your children's names. And that way you could find out if anytime something is posted online about them, you will get an email daily, weekly. You can decide how frequently you want. And the reason is this. The reason I think it's important is this. Okay, this number. The Kaplan Institute is an organization, and for most of your kids are younger, so you don't need to worry about this for a while, but some of you have kids that are in that 15 plus, and eventually all of you will have children 15 plus. But the Kaplan Institute is the organization that puts out the PSATs, some of the other guides and stuff like that to prepare for a lot of these standardized testing things. But they started surveying college admissions officers across the US back in 2014, and they've been doing it every year since. And back then they asked a question for the first time. When a student submits an application, do you also look them up on the internet? And in the first year they asked this question, 25% said yes, then 30 the next year, then 35, and it just kept going up. The most recent year, which was this January, 65% said they would look them up if they needed to. It's a very high number. But here's what's interesting. They've added a follow-up question since. Of the people who did look up students on the internet, 58% found something that basically did not help their case or their candidacy. They really were not sure that this student should be accepted to their school. But 42% found something that really pushed them to accept the student. Okay? So that is why when I talked earlier about mastery, about encouraging good uses, we can't just talk about digital citizenship as the things that we tell our children not to do, the things that we're always trying to hide and bury and keep away from the public eye. That there are ways that you can use the internet that can benefit them for their future, because they might one day be in that 42%. What are some of those good uses? Many of you said you would like to hear about this. Well, we've got a lot of places where you can learn a new skill, like language or cooking. Maybe some of you took up bread baking during the pandemic. Khan Academy is a great resource for this. YouTube is another one, and there are many great places out there to learn new skills, but it's not just that. Your children could also be raising awareness about a cause they care about, raising funds for an organization that means something to them. That is a great way of using the internet, using social media, as a way to do those things, raise awareness. Those are positive uses of the internet that it would be fine for the public to see that your child has learned how to master the use of the internet and social media in such ways. Showcasing accomplishments. Maybe they're a musician or an athlete or an aspiring writer or artist or performer of some kind. They can start blogs, and a blog could be behind passwords until they're old enough and comfortable to share it more publicly. But there's wonderful ways. And my favorite one of all is entering contests. There's so many great contests for writers, kids who like to make videos, perform music, write poetry, draw, all kinds of contests for kids that are out there. And they may never win, but it doesn't matter. Why? Because entering contests teaches them how to abide to a set of rules, to a deadline, to put themselves out there, take some risks, and have other people critique their work. And again, even if they don't win, they can start to build a portfolio of contests that they have tried to enter. And maybe one of those days they will win. But it's a fantastic use, especially if you have a kid who loves, a lot of parents tell me, I'm not ready for my kid to have their own YouTube channel yet. They're too young. Well, don't do it yet. Have them enter a contest with their video making skills instead, till they're old enough. So I think I just will close with this. And I know a lot of you, I've kept you a little longer than I wanted to, but I know there was a lot of content to cover here. I feel a lot of it is very important based on what you told me was important for you. The concepts that we talked about tonight, you can actually help to deliver to your own children. Just this month, we launched our first Cyber Academy. And we only have 5 modules up there now, but I encourage you to have your kids do it. These are short animated videos, 2 minutes each at most, and then a Kahoot quiz afterwards, after each of them, to help reinforce the learning about what are good passwords, what is 2-factor authentication, how do I protect my privacy, what are some healthy habits, and so on. And we have many more modules to come in the future. And I'd love for you all to visit that site, do it with your kids. It's a way to get them engaged in this conversation at an early age. It is designed for ages 7 to 10 years old right now. However, I think some adults might need it too. So don't feel embarrassed if you think you want to do it yourselves, or even encourage other adults that you know. And I will say to keep it going. Tonight was a great first step for you if you haven't had this kind of information or conversation before. Stay actively involved in keeping up to date. Communicate with your kids, but also with other parents in your communities. Communicate with your schools about the kinds of technologies they're asking your children to use in the classroom. but keep those lines of communication open and stay up to date. And I offer a challenge to you after today. Do one new thing you had not done before tonight. Maybe it's turn off multi-factor authentication on your kids' TikTok account or Instagram account, or it's, download security software for something you haven't yet before, or go to the Cyber Academy with your kids and try it out. Do one new thing. Again, I'm showing you the attendance codes that I showed earlier. If you need it, you have your specific code associated with your school. If your organizer wants proof that you attended tonight, this is your proof, your attendance code. And before I just open it to questions, again, you're going to get a sheet that's going to have all of the links that you saw flashed in front of you here tonight. So don't worry about writing them down. But this is our website, which has lots of resources, including that Cyber Academy, our blog, to keep you up to date on lots of information. And this is PTO Today's site that has a lot of resources as well. Your leader, whoever organized tonight's event, has access to these things. They will also get access to a recording of tonight's event. So ask the organizer of whoever invited you to tonight's event. When you close out of this session, again, as I said earlier, a survey is going to pop up. Please give me feedback. How could we do better, or what did you like? And if you choose to include your email address in your feedback, you'll be automatically entered to win a copy of our security product, which will protect up to 5 devices in your home for a year. So you don't have to give your email address. Don't feel pressured. But if you do, you'll be automatically entered into that. Okay. So I want to thank you, everyone, for joining me tonight. I will stay on for any questions. If you are listening in Spanish, you can submit your questions in the Q&A in Spanish, and Aida will actually help me translate it. So please submit the questions in the Q&A. And if you need to leave, I completely understand too. You gave me so much of your time this evening, and I do appreciate it. I wish you all the best as you proceed into this school year. Hopefully we can stay on the path that we're on, which looks like it's getting better. Not quite there completely yet, but I do have hope that we will not slide backwards with regard to this pandemic. So thanks again, everyone.